Hello, everyone. So we're the last keynote today, and we're going to talk to you a bit more about creation, and specifically about creation using generative AI to help you optimize and boost your media campaigns. So to introduce myself very quickly, my name is Etienne. I joined Artefact, and more specifically, Artefact 3000 as an engineer specializing in AI, precisely to bring all the technical and technological aspects to the creatives at Artefact 3000. So this really shows the transformation and the impact that generative AI is going to have on creative work. And Sure Artefact 3000, in a nutshell, is, on the one hand, an advertising agency that combines creative and advertising talent with Artefact's data and AI expertise to develop innovative concepts. And on the other hand, a digital production studio that automates content production thanks to AI. All right, Thomas, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, I'm Thomas Quélin and I oversee the media division for Artefact in France. There are about 100 of us today. We support clients from strategy to execution, and measurement, with a strong focus on data usage and measuring advertising ROI. So we're going to talk to you about creativity, media, AI and data. It's a topic that's very important to us at Artefact, of course, since it's been our vision for several years now. We're really pleased to see that all these areas are finally coming together, all aspects of digital marketing, whether it's creation, production, activation, or measurement. But in the end, today, we're bringing them together. We're able to come up with interesting use cases, and we're really happy, well, there you go, to have accepted Google's invitation to show you how all of this can actually be made possible within the Google Ads ecosystem. So of course we're going to talk about Google today, but these are use cases that are now widespread across the market. The starting point, right, for this presentation is as follows. And for those who are familiar with media technologies and media buying, the starting point is that indeed today algorithmics, automation and AI have really taken control of media buying in today's tools. So today, nearly 80% of investments are concentrated in Performance Max campaigns. Just as a quick reminder, Performance Max refers to campaigns that, within a single campaign line, will run across the entire Google ecosystem, whether it's YouTube, search, Gmail, display, and so on. So it's basically an automated black box driven by AI that helps boost performance. Today, that's 80% of investments in retail. It's growing very quickly. It was 50% 2 years ago, and it's not just about retail. As we were just talking about hospitality, it's actually the case. For all business models where there are data flows, these campaigns are becoming widespread. What are the consequences for you, advertisers, for users partners, and for media agencies? Well, it's that, in fact, the pre-existing precision marketing matrix, where we were used to creating associations between keywords, bid levels linked to those keywords, and audiences we would specifically target with those keywords. So we were happy to do that a few years ago. That allowed us to have a clean, structured media plan built around audiences and different messages. That's becoming less and less possible because of algorithms and automation. So what do we do under these conditions? Obviously, if the algorithm buys the same keywords for everyone, whether it's for Orange or SFR, for Samsung or Apple, no matter which example you take, we end up in a situation of status quo where it's difficult for advertisers to see media as a comparative advantage in the market. So how do you do better than your competitors and gain market share? At Artefact, we are convinced that we need to focus on two areas. The first area, the first topic is creative assets. So the purpose of Etienne's presentation will be to show you how we produce more assets. And then the second topic is the product feed. We won't go into detail about the product feed in this presentation, but of course I'd be happy to discuss it another time. So we're going to focus on the creative assets part. And why are we talking about creative assets today, this afternoon, at Google, which is truly the temple of performance advertising? Well, it's because the Google environment today is a full funnel environment. So, whereas a few years ago, and this is still the case, when talking with many clients, there is still a fairly persistent belief that the Google environment is a performance-driven environment where we run text ads on search engines. But in reality, that's not the case. Today, a lot is happening on the Google platform. There is a lot of inventory, and creative has become very important for working on the top of the funnel, the middle, and also the bottom of the funnel. There's also an important point, which is, this is a Nielsen study that we often show at various conferences. It's kind of the cliche of the afternoon, let's be honest, but it was important in the context. So this Nielsen study aims to show that, in fact, the quality of the creative is really the number one factor in the performance of digital campaigns, far ahead of things like reach, brand awareness, targeting, or even context. So obviously, this is important work for us as partners. The Google environment, as you've understood, is one that increasingly demands creative assets. When I say demanding, I mean that today, for each campaign line, we can add a lot of assets, much more than was possible just a few years ago. For example, with Performance Max, you can connect up to 20 images and 5 videos per campaign line. So we really have creative playgrounds for optimizing media that are very interesting. But at the same time, obviously, on the advertiser side, there's a bit of grumbling because producing 5 videos and 20 images, when you have a business model like a cause based on franchises, with hundreds of hotels and several brands all over the world, well, if you think about the amount of creative content that needs to be produced, you quickly end up with hundreds of videos and thousands of images. So today, getting the most out of Google Ads for us is mainly a matter of creative production. So first, producing more assets. Second, producing them faster. And third, while reducing costs. There are a number of figures on the right, which I won't go over again, that show overall there is quite a strong adoption of AI among major international brands to produce digital assets at scale today, and that this can reduce production costs in campaigns by as much as 3 or 4 times. That's it. So now we're going to try to understand how we do this with Etienne.
Exactly. So I'm going to divide my presentation into 3 parts. The first part will be fairly theoretical. Then we'll go into some lessons we've learned in the field. And finally, we'll look at 2 interesting use cases that I think will resonate with you to help illustrate my points a bit. So, as Thomas was saying, today creativity is becoming more and more important in campaigns and media orchestrations. And so we need to address this need. Generative AI in particular will allow us to provide this solution across the different segments you see here. And also, today we're going to focus on large-scale variant production. What's especially interesting in our collaborations with Thomas is that by connecting the media agency and the creative agency, we can set up feedback loops to collect data that will then allow us to optimize the creative assets we implement. Even though generative AI, and let me add a quick disclaimer here, enables us to produce a huge amount of content at scale, it's not necessarily the immediate answer to better media performance. So we really need to find the right balance in how much extra content we produce in order to achieve better results. So to break down the creative chain a bit, the creative value chain, we can start with conception, then move on to production, post-production, and adaptation. So even from the conception stage, we can see that generative AI can provide a lot of solutions. And there are use cases, especially for creating highly personalized, very quick mood boards with generative AI, and according to some figures as well. As our own experience, we see a 40 to 50% time reduction on low value-added tasks. So even though the mood board itself is an important task in the design process, spending hours today searching through stock images and so on to create a mood board takes a lot of time. But now with generative AI, we can actually create the assets you see here in just a few prompts, which is really interesting. And for us, with our clients, this has completely changed the way we work with them. Since now we're almost working in real time, creating nearly finished assets, whereas before there were frequent back and forths during the mock-up, prototype and sketch phases and so on. So it's really going to be a gain each fois, even though it can sometimes have drawbacks since the client may have very high expectations right from the start of the project. On the production side, we also see that generative AI will bring a lot of value, especially in large-scale production, and particularly in cost reduction. So as you can see here, and this is really based on our personal experience, ISE on-cut average, we see a cost reduction by a factor of 3 to 4. Sometimes this can increase if we're talking about assets that are less, I would say, how should I put it, that don't include products or that are more like stock images and so on. But overall, generative AI will allow us to internally to create a whole range of automated pipelines to address various use cases. So the first use case, which is the most, how should I say, predominant among our clients, is the integration of products into AI-generated environments. We will also have use cases where I will put clothes or skirt accessories on AI models, modify backgrounds, integrate sometimes 3D key products into 2D environments generated by AI and so on. So as a result, we can see that AI can help with all of these use cases. And finally, when it comes to all post-production and content adaptation, generative AI will really allow brands, especially brands like Accor, which today face major challenges with the quantity and volume of assets, to take a key visual, meaning a single asset that you see on the slide, and adapt it into an entire series of assets. That means we'll be able to take this key visual and create it in 10 different formats, banners and so on, to populate search engines and to fill the platforms and tools used for media orchestration. And so similarly here, we see that sometimes we can actually produce up to 10 times more assets within the same allotted time for certain types of content. So now here are a few lessons we've learned in the field, since I'd say that today we've moved past the initial AI hype and are starting to see real concrete cases and genuine learnings. The first of us is the difference in maturity between the various generative AI modalities. Obviously, text is currently the most mature of all these modalities. We see clients who, as we showed earlier with examples like Bouygues, have implemented it, tested it, and then scaled it up. For images, I would say the level of maturity is a bit lower, but it's still approaching about 80% commercially usable. Here, we're seeing clients starting to integrate and create internal solutions to produce images with AI, integrate products, and so on. But there are still some challenges, especially when it comes to product integration, where we encounter the most issues in ensuring that products are truly pixel perfect within AI-generated environments. And finally, the third modality, which is the least mature as of today, is video, which is currently around 40 to 50%. So here, we recommend our clients to test and really start producing videos with AI, but it's true that it's still rare to see fully AI-driven media campaigns with video, even though there are some incredibly interesting and truly impressive examples we've seen online. However, these are often cases where the main goal is to highlight the use of AI itself rather than to actually boost performance at scale. The second lesson, which is also super interesting, and this is really for a certain type of our clients, especially those who have products with a lot of turnover and so on. It's about creating digital twins, 3D versions of the products, specifically to combine them with AI. So digital twins is a technology that has actually existed for a very long time. It started in the supply chain and in industry, and now it's beginning to reach retailers. And so today, they're actually coupling this with generative AI to, I would say, address some use cases that I've mentioned here. So the first one is using digital twins to integrate them into AI-generated environments. So here, for example, I generated the photo you see in the background with a generative AI solution. And then you can directly integrate the digital twin into tools like Blender within the image. And so this makes it possible to create assets where the product is not damaged at all. The second use case, is actually composing scenes in 3D, which we will then regenerate with generative AI. That is to say, AI today is capable of completely mapping an image and therefore knowing exactly the contours of the product, etc. And then, thanks to generative AI, we'll be able to add, as you can see on the right, better texture, improved shadows, better lighting, and so on. And the third use case with digital twins, which is also extremely interesting, is that we'll actually be able to produce data sets, large data sets of data, to fine-tune diffusion models, which are the models that allow us to generate images with AI today. And so this will simply make it possible to generate and produce assets featuring the product in a whole range of environments that meet the client's needs. And the third takeaway, which I also think is quite important to highlight, is that today fully automated generative AI is not a reality. That is to say, there is always, and we see this in our projects, a need for post-production for several reasons. The first is that AI still has hallucinations, so post-production is indeed necessary to correct these hallucinations. The second reason is that a final asset will in any case need a bit of post-production, if only to add titles or legal disclaimers or to place a logo and so on. Also, the quality of the asset and compliance will in any case have to be checked by a human, so marketers who will then validate that the asset properly meets the brand's guidelines, etc. And finally, and this is also a pretty important point, AI Quélin will not turn someone who is absolutely not creative into a creative person. On the other hand, it will definitely give a huge boost to people who are already creative. And we can see it today because there are young talents at Artefact 3000 who are really taking charge of AI solutions, who are themselves creative, and who are managing to crack use cases that are absolutely incredible. And now I'm going to tell you about two real-world use cases we've encountered. Unfortunately, I won't be able to mention any names, but I think you might recognize them. The first is one of today's leaders in the luxury sector who called on us to produce assets using generative AI from start to finish. What we observed, and we actually did this exercise with them, was to do a kind of A/B testing to compare a workflow without AI, which you see above, that would have cost around 200,000 euros for, I think it was 14 or 15 assets to produce, versus a workflow with AI, which in the end cost not just 63,000 euros, but still, that's a reduction by a factor of 2 or even 3 or 4. And so the final asset went from costing 14,000 euros to 4,000 euros. So we can clearly see that generative AI can drastically change the way we work and especially reduce costs. And what was interesting here is that by using the digital twins I mentioned earlier, we can completely eliminate the photo shoot phase, since we can use the digital twins just like products that we can place in any position to do virtual photo shoots. And so afterwards, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be able to generate with a bit of post-production assets, final assets. The second use case, which was also very relevant, involved a major player in France and also in Europe in the garden supply sector who approached us to create and develop an entire production pipeline to integrate hot patches that are initially on white backgrounds into AI-generated environments. Some of the challenges we faced on this project were that the client had very specific moods and atmospheres. So as a result, we had to train and fine-tune generative AI models to precisely match these moods using a data set we had collected together with the client. So the pipeline is as follows. Obviously, this is a very simplified overview, but first, we integrate the product into an AI-generated environment. What you see here is not the client's actual product, but a similar one. Next, we place the real product, which you can see here on the patch hot, into the AI environment. After that, we'll go in and adjust the shadows, the lighting, and so on. Then we'll be able to generate a whole range of variations of these products in different environments, which will specifically address the issues Thomas mentioned earlier, namely having enough volume to support media activation campaigns. All right, I'll hand it back over to you now so you can give us...
We'll wrap up this presentation with some figures, particularly focusing on the impact of producing creative assets at scale within the Google Ads environment. So we set up a series of A/B tests within the Google Ads environment where on one hand we had what you might call standard campaigns, that is with a reasonable number of assets in line with the creative budget clients usually have, typically 1 or 2 videos and a few static images. And we A/B tested these against campaigns where we had the full range of creative assets thanks to AI-assisted production. So typically on Performance Max, that's 5 videos and 20 static images. Here you can see some results from the hotel industry as well as the cloud industry, with interesting uplifts in the Google Ads ROAS. So a 25% increase observed in the hotel industry, a 20% decrease in CPA in the cloud sector, and conversion rates that have also increased dramatically thanks to the performance of the creatives. So to sum up, the goal, as you've understood, is that today's Google environment requires more and more assets so that the algorithms can do their job. Creatives are one of the key elements of optimization, so it's important to work on them. And when you manage to work on them, you reduce development budget and optimize performance. So naturally, we can only encourage you to move in this direction, and we're available for any questions you may have. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, everyone.